77 workers, dead. Some bodies never recovered. A monument that doesn't list all their names, and voices in the darkness where they fell. Grand Coulee Dam, built between 1933 and 1942 on the Columbia River in eastern Washington state, is one of the largest concrete structures ever constructed in the United States. It stands 550 feet tall. It's 5,200 feet long. It contains 12 million cubic yards of concrete, enough concrete to build a sidewalk around the Earth at the equator. At its peak, over 8,000 workers labored day and night to build this monument to American engineering. But the dam came at a terrible cost. 77 workers died during the original 9 years of construction, crushed by falling debris, drowned in the Columbia River, buried in landslides, electrocuted, burned. 25 fell to their deaths, most from the dam itself. 18 were struck by falling objects. 12 died in vehicle accidents. 6 drowned and were never found. And some deaths remain unexplained. In 1938, the Grand Coulee American Legion commissioned a 10-foot blue granite monument to honor the dead. It was described as the largest monument ever made in Colville and one of the most beautiful ever erected in the state. The monument lists 75 names, but at least 77 workers died by 1941. And when you include later construction phases and the 1984 death, the total reaches 82. So whose names are missing? And why? But here's what most people don't know. Workers and engineers report hearing voices near sections of the dam where fatal accidents occurred. Shadow figures appear in tunnels. Equipment malfunctions in specific locations for no reason. And Native American tribes whose sacred burial grounds were flooded when Lake Roosevelt formed behind the dam believe the site is cursed. Disturbed ground, restless spirits. 77 deaths that may have awakened something that should have been left alone. This is the story of Grand Coulee Dam, the 8th wonder of the world, and the 77 workers whose names should never be forgotten. The idea of damming the Columbia River near the Grand Coulee had been discussed since the early 1900s. The Columbia Plateau in eastern Washington was fertile but arid. Farmers needed water. The river was nearby but flowed through a deep canyon. 2 proposals emerged. One group wanted to dig a gravity-fed canal to divert water from the river. The other proposed building a massive dam that would generate electricity and pump water uphill to irrigate the plateau. The dam supporters argued their plan would do both, provide irrigation and generate enormous amounts of hydroelectric power. The debate raged throughout the 1920s, but the Great Depression changed everything. In 1933, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office. The country was in a crisis. Unemployment was at 25%. Roosevelt needed projects that would put people to work. Grand Coulee Dam fit perfectly. It would employ thousands. It would demonstrate American engineering prowess. And it would transform the Columbia Basin into productive farmland. Roosevelt approved the project as part of the Public Works Administration. But there was a problem. Congress had only approved funding for a low dam, 290 feet tall. This dam would generate electricity, but wouldn't raise the reservoir high enough to support irrigation. The Bureau of Reclamation had a different idea. They would build the foundation for a high dam, 550 feet tall, even though they only had approval for the low dam. Then they would convince Congress to upgrade the design later. It was a gamble, but it worked. On July 16, 1933, a crowd of 3,000 people gathered at the construction site. The first stake was driven into the ground. Excavation began. Workers started drilling into the bedrock of the Columbia River Canyon. They would need to remove 22 million cubic yards of dirt and stone to reach stable foundation. That's enough material to fill a freight train stretching from Seattle to New York. The scale was staggering, but so was the danger. Construction of Grand Coulee Dam was divided into phases. First, 2 massive cofferdams had to be built to divert the Columbia River. These weren't small structures. The West Cofferdam was 2,000 feet long and 50 feet thick. It was constructed 110 feet above the bedrock. The purpose was simple: block half the river so the foundation could be built on dry ground. Then remove that cofferdam and build another on the opposite side to complete the other half. Simple in theory, deadly in practice. By the end of 1935, about 1,200 workers had completed the cofferdams. Then came the excavation. Workers used jackhammers, dynamite, and heavy machinery to carve into the canyon walls and riverbed. Dust filled the air. Rock slides were common. In one incident, a worker was buried alive when a landslide collapsed on him. His body was never recovered. The Columbia River claimed others. Men working near the water's edge slipped and fell. The current was swift. Some bodies washed downstream and were never found. The first concrete was poured on December 6, 1935. Governor Clarence Martin presided over the ceremony. From that point forward, concrete poured continuously for years. 8 large mixers processed the concrete on site. It was delivered by rail cars and poured into 50-square-foot columns using crane-lifted buckets. Each bucket held 8 tons of concrete. The cranes swung these massive buckets hundreds of feet in the air, positioning them over the forms. One mistake, one cable failure, and workers below would be crushed. Falls were the deadliest danger. 25 workers fell to their deaths. Most fell from the dam itself while working on scaffolding or forms hundreds of feet above the canyon floor. Others fell from cranes, from the tops of cofferdams, or from cliffs while surveying. One worker lost his balance while walking across a narrow beam.
He fell over 300 feet. His body was recovered days later, broken beyond recognition.
Being struck by falling objects was the second most common cause of death. 18 workers were killed this way. Concrete buckets swung by cranes, rocks loosened by dynamite, tools dropped from scaffolds. One worker was killed when a massive steel form broke free and fell. Another was crushed when a crane cable snapped and the load it was carrying plummeted down. The dam was a vertical construction site. Gravity was the enemy, and it claimed victim after victim. Vehicle accidents killed 12 workers. The roads around the dam were rough, unpaved, and treacherous. Trucks carrying supplies rolled over cliffs. Cars collided in the dust. One worker died when his vehicle skidded off an icy road and plunged into the Columbia River. His body was never recovered. 9 workers were crushed by machinery or falling debris. 4 were electrocuted while working with high-voltage equipment. 3 suffered fatal burns. 2 were buried in landslides. 1 died in an explosion while handling dynamite. And 2 died from heart failure, likely brought on by the extreme physical demands of the work. By 1937, the foundation was complete. In March 1938, the contractor MWAK completed the lower dam. Consolidated Builders, Inc. began constructing the high dam. By December 1939, the West Powerhouse was completed. About 5,500 workers were on site that year. Between 1940 and 1941, the dam's 11 floodgates were installed on the spillway. On June 1, 1942, water first overtopped the spillway. Grand Coulee Dam was complete.
In 1938, before the dam was even finished, the Grand Coulee American Legion commissioned a monument to honor the workers who had died. They chose a 10-foot shaft of blue Georgia granite. It was polished to a mirror shine. 75 names were engraved on it. At the dedication ceremony, community leaders praised the sacrifice of these men. They called them heroes, builders of the future. But even as the monument was unveiled, more workers were dying. By the time construction officially ended in 1942, at least 77 workers had died. But the monument listed only 75 names. Who were the 2 missing men? Historians at the Northeast Washington Genealogical Society began investigating. They combed through death certificates, hospital records, newspaper obituaries, and coroner reports. They found discrepancies. Some workers who died were never added to the monument. Others were listed under incorrect names. And when the third powerhouse was built between 1967 and 1974, and when shore stabilization work was done in 1984, more workers died. The total death toll reached at least 82. But some of the dead were never found. 6 workers drowned in the Columbia River. Their bodies were swept away by the current. Search parties looked for days. Some bodies eventually washed up miles downstream. Others were never recovered. Were they buried in silt at the bottom of Lake Roosevelt? Did they decompose in the river and disappear? Or are they still there, entombed somewhere in the structure itself?
There are stories, unverified but persistent. One worker claimed he saw a man fall into a concrete pour. By the time the crew could stop the flow, the man had sunk beneath the surface. Retrieving him would have meant tearing out freshly poured concrete, delaying the project by days and costing thousands of dollars. The decision was made to leave him. The concrete hardened, and somewhere inside Grand Coulee Dam, a worker's body remains. The Bureau of Reclamation denies this story. They say no workers were entombed, but the story persists. Since the dam's completion, workers and engineers have reported strange phenomena. Voices echoing in tunnels where no one is present. Shadows moving along catwalks that are empty. Equipment malfunctioning in specific sections for no mechanical reason. One maintenance worker in the 1980s reported hearing a man shouting for help deep inside the dam. He followed the sound, but found nothing. Another worker saw a shadowy figure standing on a gantry crane. When he climbed up to investigate, no one was there. Are these stories real, or are they the result of isolation, darkness, and the knowledge that 77 men died building this place? Psychologists call it priming. If you know a place is associated with death, your mind looks for evidence to confirm it. Shadows become figures. Echoes become voices. But the workers who report these experiences insist they're real. They've seen things, heard things, and they refuse to work alone in certain sections of the dam. Then there's the Native American perspective. The construction of Grand Coulee Dam flooded 70,000 acres of land. This land included burial grounds and sacred sites of the Colville, Spokane, Sanpoil, and other tribes. Entire villages were submerged. Cemeteries were relocated, but not all graves were found. When Lake Roosevelt filled, it covered these sites forever. Tribal elders believe the dam disturbed sacred ground. They say the spirits of their ancestors and the spirits of the 77 dead workers now share this place. Restless, disturbed, waiting.
On June 1st, 1942, Grand Coulee Dam was officially complete. Water overtopped the spillway for the first time. The sight was magnificent. A curtain of water 550 feet wide plunging into the canyon below. Lake Roosevelt began to fill. Eventually, it would stretch 151 miles upstream, creating one of the largest reservoirs in North America. The dam's 2 original powerhouses began generating electricity. At full capacity, Grand Coulee produced more power than any other dam in the United States at that time. President Roosevelt, who had championed the project, called it one of the greatest achievements of the New Deal. It employed thousands during the Depression. It brought electricity to rural communities. It irrigated over 1 million acres of arid land, transforming the Columbia Basin into productive farmland. Engineers called it the eighth wonder of the world. Tourists came from across the country to see it. Grand Coulee Dam was a triumph. But the cost was undeniable. 77 workers dead, over 100 injured, thousands displaced, and a river forever changed.
Today, Grand Coulee Dam remains one of the largest concrete structures in the world. It generates over 21 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity annually. It irrigates over 600,000 acres of farmland. The Columbia Basin Project, made possible by the dam, produces billions of dollars worth of crops every year. Apples, wheat, potatoes, and grapes grow where once there was only sagebrush. But the legacy is complicated. The dam destroyed salmon runs on the Columbia River. Native American tribes depended on salmon for food, culture, and economy. When the dam was built without fish ladders, it blocked salmon migration. Entire salmon populations were wiped out. The tribes lost a way of life. The U.S. government eventually paid reparations, but money can't replace culture. And then there are the 77 dead. The monument still stands, but it's tucked away in a quiet corner. Many visitors to Grand Coulee Dam never see it. The names are fading. Granite erodes slowly, but it does erode. In another century, will those names still be readable? Will anyone remember the men who died building this place? The paranormal reports continue. Workers still hear voices, still see shadows. Equipment still malfunctions in the same sections. Engineers shrug it off. Old buildings make noise. Shadows are tricks of light. Electrical systems are complex and temperamental. But the workers know what they've experienced, and they're not convinced.
Grand Coulee Dam is a monument to American ambition. It transformed a region. It powered industries. It fed millions. But it also killed 77 workers. Maybe 82. And some of those workers were never properly honored. Their names are missing from the monument. Their bodies were never found. And their voices, some say, still echo in the darkness. Why were some names left off the monument? Were there workers whose deaths were covered up or forgotten? And are the paranormal reports real, or are they the result of guilt and memory haunting a place built on sacrifice? These questions remain unanswered. If you want to uncover more stories of American infrastructure hiding dark secrets, subscribe to Hidden America. Next time, we'll explore the Silver Bridge collapse in West Virginia and the mysterious Mothman sightings that preceded it. We'll investigate the paranormal warnings,
the structural failure that killed 46 people in 20 seconds, and the question that still haunts Point Pleasant: was the Mothman trying to warn them? Subscribe now for more hidden infrastructure stories, and remember, every great achievement has a shadow. Sometimes that shadow is made of 77 graves and voices that never stopped calling.